here I am. And I'd like to welcome you to this edition of Venus going retrograde. So we have a very interesting few weeks ahead of us, a little bit more than a few weeks, actually. We've got about 5 weeks, 6 weeks of Venus retrograde coming up. So Venus is moving retrograde on the 12th of May and is staying in a retrograde pattern until the 24th of June. This is 2020 I'm talking about. So this is dedicated to what Venus retrograde means, how we might work with that energy, how we can make it work for us, and who it might affect more than most. So first of all, let's have a think about what Gemini represents. So, not Gemini, sorry, Venus. Venus is a planet of love. She is known for her generosity, for her abundance, for her natural flow, for her natural creativity. She's about love and companionship, and she's very forgiving. She's also a sexual planet. She's an abundance planet. So she's got a lot of connotations. It's I guess she's a bit like the sort of cornucopia of life. She's known as a benefic, like both Venus and Jupiter seem to have this kind of really good reputation, because they represent flow. They represent divine providence, sorry, and they are seen as being quite lucky. So she's a lucky thing, where she shows up in your chart shows where you can be lucky and where you might achieve a certain amount of grace. She also speaks to us about our relationships. So, again, where she shows up in your charts indicates the kind of relationship that we might seek over and over again, the kinds of people that we might connect with. So she really does explain a lot. And when we look at the relationships that our Venus has with other planets in our chart, that also describes the kinds of pitfalls we might come across in our life to do with money and to do with love and the flow of feeling good. So it's all about feeling good. Venus is all about feeling good. So she's going retrograde. Now, what does that mean? Well, I've titled this "The Magic to Create Inner Standings." So it's not understanding; it's inner. This is about going inside. Like all retrogrades are about reworking things. I always think of the Mercury retrograde as reworking, rewinding, re-envisaging, reimagining. Taking everything back on a mental level. When Venus goes retrograde, we are rewinding on our feelings. We're rewinding on abundance. We're rewinding on generosity. We're revaluing, is probably the right word to consider. Now, it's also interesting to think about the two star signs that Venus is the ruler of and the houses that she rules it or has kind of dominion over. So she's the natural ruler of Taurus, which is the ruler of the second house traditionally. And she's also the ruler of Libra and the seventh house. Now, what are these about? The second house, or Taurus, is very primarily related to resources and the accumulation of resources. So it's about our home, like the actual house, our physical, like our money, the resources that keep us alive, so our electricity, gas, and all this, that, and the other, but also our belongings, our possessions, the things that we have in our life that kind of say who we are. So it's a lot to do with value. Most people with really strong Taurian energy in their charts have really sumptuous homes. They tend to have very sensuous homes that you can kind of sink into and be really comfortable, because that's the whole Venus energy. Now, the Libra seventh house energy that Venus also represents is about relationships, falling in love. It's about enemies as well. It's about friendships. It's about the natural flow for us between who we are and the people we interact with. So anyone with a really strong seven house usually has lots of people in their life, and is always busy and in and out. They have very reciprocal lives with lots of meaning and context coming from their relationships. So Venus, when she goes retrograde, is ruling a lot of things. We need to consider our possessions and our wealth, And we also need to consider our relationships to other people. Now, we also need to consider, I'm saying we need to consider a lot here. um, it's worth thinking about. There you go. I've said it a different way and I've just disappeared. I realize it looks like my cardigan um, is blending into my background, my green screen, even though it's not green, but never mind. So it might seem like I disappear every now and again. I'm just trying to recreate that, but it's not happening now. Never mind. So, um, when Venus goes retrograde, she's going retrograde in the sign of Gemini. And Gemini is about thinking, it's about communications, it's about community. It's kind of funny, actually, that Venus is going retrograde in the sign of Gemini just after, literally 6 days after the North Node changes into the sign of Gemini. So there's a very, very strong Geminian theme going on right now, which is about community, communication, and education. And by education, I don't necessarily mean schooling. I mean us waking up, us learning about things, us learning about the world, us taking responsibility for where we might have gaping big holes in our knowledge base. I know I do, and I know everyone does if we care to really think about it. Nobody's a real expert. So this whole Gemini thing, if you were to photo fit a Gemini, they kind of flitter from things. They're like little butterflies. They kind of flitter in here and they flitter in there, and they're known for moving from space to space very quickly. And they're the kinds of people that have book clubs and actually go to book clubs and actually read. They love learning and they love short amounts of it. They don't necessarily want to go in really deep. They like kind of surface levels. Like they're butterflies. They collect the pollen from one flower, then they move on to the next and the next and the next. They're the kinds of people that go to the new restaurants when they're open. They go to the theatre. They're always accumulating information and doing it in a social way and doing it in a really quick way, like a little bit here, a little bit there, and that's their style. And so as Venus, which is about flow and sociability and money, and as she goes into the sign of Gemini, which she's already in, by the way, our attentions of being social become a lot more flitty, a lot less deep and a lot more surface level, so we can get a little bit of info here, get a little bit of info there. We can make a lot more friends. I'm noticing there's a lot more going on social media at the moment. And of course there is, because right now Venus is in Gemini and we're all in quarantine. Hello. This is what's going on. People are connecting very quickly and trading very quickly on a little bit of information here, there, and everywhere. As she goes retrograde, I'm expecting us to start getting a bit nostalgic. So our relationships are under review. We often think about past lovers or past friends. Old people from the past come up either in our consciousness, suddenly, like we think about them for no real reason, or a memory comes back and we have this inner standing, we have this inner moment to work out what that whole thing meant to us and what value it had on our lives. So it's about understanding at an inner level the value of things. So that's one effect. Another effect is that the things we have change in value quite quickly. So our possessions change in value quite quickly when Venus is retrograde. Great for antiques dealers because they can hike up the prices. People don't really know. But it wouldn't surprise me if stuff in the markets either goes sky high or bottoms out. I don't think price is going to be a very good indicator of what something is actually really worth. I think we're better off holding back. I'm hoping nobody can really sell or buy a house, in May, June time, not to scupper somebody's plans, but just because with all this Gemini energy and with all this change with the North nodes going in and Venus being retrograde, it seems like a kind of ill-advised time to sell your house. It seems a little bit risky because it's all about value. And we're learning things about the value of our possessions, the value of our homes, the value of who we are at an inner level, and it's a really personal thing. We're also learning an inner understanding the value of social connection, which is a very Gemini theme and also a very Venus theme, but we're feeling it. So it might be that given that Venus is a natural ruler of the seventh house, and seventh house also has enemies as well as friends and whatnot. So it's also a time when we might come up against people, or seem to come up against people. As we open our minds to different things and we have a new understanding, we are projecting, always in a projection with other people, and we're having these inner standings about it, and it might make us feel separate from people for a short while. So there's a lot of stuff going on, really. Thankfully, it's over in 2020 by the 24th of June. So it's 6 weeks or so of being a little wistful, a little nostalgic, and a bit uncertain about the value of what's really going on in the world. And even though it goes direct again from the 20th of June, we're still in the kind of hangover of Venus retrograde until the end of July. So I would say our relationships will really start picking up from the 30th of July again, and our confidence in our social ability, in our trust in the communities that we're in, will increase the later we are in through the year. So I think up until the end of July, things could be really uncertain for us. Not only have we got this quarantine, not only have we got a whole series of different astrological events going on, which I've spoken about in lots of different videos. When you put them all together, there is just this huge, massive confluence of learning right now. And I just think it's almost too mind blowing for people to understand. And it's putting everyone into a place of polarity. So I think this hangover will suddenly work its way out by the end of July, at least for us to understand what we need to learn, who we might want to learn it from, and how we might revalue ourselves in relation to all of this new information. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. I hope it's useful to you. The people that are going to be most affected by this are people who have planets, or angles between 5 and 22 degrees in the sign of Gemini or Sagittarius, and also in Pisces and Virgo, but a lot less. It's a lot less significant for them. But definitely, the Gemini is going to be feeling probably not so talkative, not as talkative as usual. And the Sagittarians are probably going to be feeling a lot more defiant than usual and triggering quite a few scraps. But hey, I think they'll be okay with that. Anyway, lots of love to you wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining me today. So thanks for my live watchers, and to anyone who re-listens on either podcasting, Spotify or YouTube.